then joined in our conversation about the first inaugural address by George Washington, a warrior, by another citizen warrior, Senator Tom Cotton. I am now outnumbered 2 Arkansas people. Welcome, Senator Cotton.
It's great to be here. I feel so privileged to finally have graduated from the lowbrow JV version of the Hugh Hewitt show to the Friday Hillsdale hour of the show.
It is very, very high up. It is very, very high up. Have you done your reading? We sent you reading. We sent you 5 inaugural addresses.
I've done a little bit of my reading, yeah.
And so what struck you about Washington's inaugural address?
Well, just the elevated tone of the address, as the father of our country. First in war, but then also in peace, and the appeal that he made to all factions, all elements of what was still a very new country, very young country, with a lot of potential divisions inside of it. And that spirit, I think, has continued forward through all the inaugural addresses you sent me, but really most presidents' inaugural addresses.
It's a much remarked upon thing in the Post today and in news coverage that I watched last night, that we are a divided country. Have we never not been a divided country?
Yeah, as I walk around the streets today, one of my favorite sports is to try to identify the Trumpers from the resistance. But it's also a reminder that there was a time in our history when we actually had a real resistance during an inauguration in 1861. And no matter how divided people may think we are in our times, that there are times in our past when we were much more divided, and that we have an opportunity to overcome those divisions and try to achieve some real great progress and things for the American people.
And much more perilous. I pointed out when Dr. Arnn sat down, Washington, 76 years later, is Lincoln's second inaugural address. 76 years after that is 1941. We're not at war, but the rest of the war is, and Wren churches are being blown up and Guildhall bombed, and then 76 later, Donald Trump. This is not really as dramatic a period of time, Dr. Arnn, as those 3 other events.
It isn't. In principle, by the way, it is in some ways that we could talk about, but in practice, in principle, there are always terrible looming dangers, and the ones we have today are very bad, in my opinion, related to the ones in the Civil War. But it's good to celebrate that they're not, there's not an army in the field attempting to overcome the government of the United States on our own soil, and we shouldn't act like there is.
In Lincoln's first inaugural, which I did not read to get prepared, were there agents in the city attempting to conspire?
Well, Lincoln references in his second inaugural, 4 years earlier, in which there were spies and agents inside the city trying to foment disunion.
It is really kind of hard for our commentators today to figure out what to talk about when it comes down to this. We're back on Washington, and you mentioned this earlier, Dr. Arnn. There exists in the economy and course of nature an indissoluble union between virtue and happiness, between duty and advantage, between the genuine maximums of an honest and magnanimous policy and the solid rewards of public prosperity and felicity. He's making an argument about virtue.
That's right. Lots of foolish scholars build this web that we're just a low, crass country built on self-interest, greed, and all that. That's a big claim of the American left today, but it's an old claim in historians, which went left 2 or 3 generations ago. But you have to read this speech, and you have to wonder, who did they pick to be the first chief executive? Who was the most important man in the founding of America? And he's qualified to say this paragraph, and it's just gorgeous. And in fact, it's a summary of classical political philosophy.
How so?
Well, Aristotle's claim is the greatest human good is happiness, and happiness is an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. You can't be happy if you're a bad person. And that's the whole culminating meaning of that book. And he identifies the highest virtues, too. But this is just that. He just writes that in a paragraph.
George Washington in 1789, April in those days, April of 1789. Don't go anywhere. Senator Tom Cotton will be with us this hour, Dr. Arnn this hour and next hour from hillsdale.edu. 22 minutes after the hour, Americans. Hugh Hewitt from the Kirby Center of Hillsdale College, hillsdale.edu. Joined in person by Senator Tom Cotton of the great state of Arkansas and the president of the Lantern of the North, Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. Gentlemen, we're talking about Lincoln's first inaugural right now. I am loath to close. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart, and hearthstone all over this broad land will yet swell the chorus of the Union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. Larry Arnn, that comes at the end of what Tom Cotton off-air just described as a brief.
Yeah, the first inaugural and the second inaugural of Lincoln are the starkest contrast, one of the longest and one of the shortest. And the second is, I don't know if we're going to talk about it, but it's a beautiful poem and very brief. And the first one is a legal argument about the nature of the Union, coupled with an appeal that we don't have the power to end it, and we love each other, and we mustn't end it.
Senator Cotton, when you read these things as a United States Senator, and you're going to be, how close to the President and the President-elect today before they take the oaths and then when they give the speech? Where do they put the senators? Behind them?
Well, we'll be a lot closer than I was 4 years ago as a congressman up in the nosebleed seats of the stage. I think 4 years ago the senators were to the speaker's right, the audience's left, just in the seats right off the lectern.
And so it's a historic deal. When you read these things and prepare, what do you think about Lincoln's argument on the eve of the Civil War?
Well, the legal brief section of the first inaugural is very compelling. It makes a very strong case that the Union predates the Constitution and that the Union is indissoluble. And certainly you can't have states simply seceding of their own accord. But, that final concluding passage, is, as Larry said of the second inaugural, a kind of fine poetry. And, you read it today, at least I read it today, and you think, where did he have the wit, the insight, the grace, the brilliance to come up with what are relatively simple words, but simple words put together in a beautiful fashion. And you still hear those echoes today, shortly after a quite astounding election in November. Barack Obama said in the Oval Office that this is just an intramural scrimmage. We're all on the same team together. And that, put in modern terms, is an echo of what Lincoln said in that final paragraph of the first inaugural about our bonds as Americans and as citizens, no matter how much our elections may rage and become vitriolic and partisan and full of passion.
There will be 4 former presidents on the dais today, and the defeated rival. This may be the first time we've done this where there's a president with a defeated rival. Obviously, George Herbert Walker Bush was defeated by Clinton and was there, but you have a successful president, a defeated rival, and 4 living presidents. I just love the world sees that we don't shoot our former presidents, and that is itself very, very rare.
Oh, yeah. Lincoln makes the case in this speech that the first time a free people, by popular vote, changed the regime was in 1800 in the United States of America. And the principle it established, he says, is that ballots replace bullets. And that's the great thing. And remember, in 1800, what happened was the party of George Washington, the party that founded the United States of America, the Federalist Party, was destroyed by popular vote. And then, of course, after that, Thomas Jefferson said, we are all one country. What did he say? All Democrats, all Republicans now?
The first inaugural. My countrymen, one and all, think calmly and well upon the whole subject. Nothing valuable can be lost by taking time. If there be an object to hurry any of you in hot haste to a step which you would not take deliberately, that object will be frustrated by taking time. But no good object can be frustrated by it. He's actually urging patience, Larry Arnn, which is something maybe a lot of people in this town right now haven't got much of.
You asked me once, did he think he could make a peace and prevent the war? I think he harbored that hope. I mean, there were ambassadors, he mentions it, from the South waiting on him, looking for a meeting, which they never got. So they regarded themselves as a different country, but he thought maybe he could put that to bed by time.
Did he keep the border states in with this argument? They didn't leave.
He was talking to them.
He was talking to Kentucky, and they did not leave. I'll be right back with Senator Tom Cotton, Dr. Larry Arnn of Hillsdale College as we continue on Inauguration Day. Stay tuned, America. 33 minutes after the hour, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C. at the Kirby Center, Hillsdale College's outpost of reason and liberty, right in the shadow of the Capitol. Joined this morning by United States Senator Tom Cotton, who will be on the dais today as we swear in a new president, say goodbye to an old one. Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, is in town as well. We're looking at some of the old inaugural address. The greatest of them all, Dr. Larry Arnn, is the second inaugural address of Lincoln. And I don't believe anyone quarrels with that estimate. Why is it so great?
It's great for two reasons. One is it summarizes the war as a penance for the injustice of slavery, which we have all been complicit in. We all pay. And then second, it lays the ground for the reuniting of America, having paid that price. And of course it does that in what I think is the greatest language any president ever wrote. And so it's just lovely. One part of it is like Macbeth. If every drop of blood drawn by the bondsman's toil through 200 years, bondsman's unrequited toil is repaid by another drawn now by the sword, still it will be said that the ways of the Lord are righteous altogether. That's like the language in Shakespeare when Macbeth is about to kill his kinsman to get his throne, and he imagines angels above crying out against and demons below crying out for the blood of Duncan. So that's a cosmic justice. It's like the Declaration of Independence. You can't, we have paid for this, and we should have. And he
adds as well, in the first inaugural, he makes no moral assault on the South. In this, he says, both read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and each invokes his aid against the other. It may seem strange that any man should dare to ask a just God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of other men's faces, but let us judge not that we be judged. The prayers of both could not be answered. That of neither has been answered fully. The Almighty has his own purposes. That's a judgment, Tom Cotton. He actually does throw down on the South at this point, although elliptical and somewhat parsed. It's there.
Well, in his indirect and measured way. But the judgments of the Lord in this case were pretty stiff. The Civil War wasn't just our worst war. Still to this day, if you tally up all the casualties from every other war we've been in, they barely surpassed the casualties that we had in the Civil War. So the cost that was paid to rid us of the sin of slavery were high indeed.
The idea that a speech would even matter. 600,000 people are dead. The war is almost over, Larry Arnn. The idea that a speech would even matter is significant, that Lincoln would think his words could make a difference.
Well, that brings up the Gettysburg Address. History will little note nor long remember what we say here, but never forget what they did here. And that turns out not to be so.
Not to be true.
Is that what we might call a noble lie?
That's exactly what that is.
But history can easily forget what people did there because there's no immediate reminder. There's nothing to show them, especially in an era before video and audio recording. But for thousands of years, history has recorded words. And Lincoln, I think, knew that his words would be recorded to memorialize what had happened at Gettysburg and at so many other battlefields and throughout the entire war, as the second inaugural shows.
Let me ask you both. The last paragraph of the second inaugural is, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right that God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all we may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. And he ends. It's very high, very mighty. What do you expect from Mr. Trump today when he becomes President Trump, Senator Cotton?
Well, I expect it'll be in the spirit of Lincoln's inaugurals, but in the spirit of many other presidential inaugurals, appealing to the better angels of our nature. He recognizes that many people are still quite opposed to his election and his presidency. I don't think that Donald Trump, with no criticism of him, will quite achieve the lyrical beauty of Abraham Lincoln, but then I wouldn't say that 43 other presidents have achieved that either. I also understand that he's going to aim for some of the brevity of Lincoln's second inaugural versus his first inaugural, which is a good thing, because not many people have ever told me that I wish that politician had talked longer.
I've never actually been told that his speech was too short. What do you expect today?
Well, I think it's an important speech for Trump. It's important because it's in this long line of speeches, and it's amazing, by the way, even Franklin Roosevelt, whose purposes are clearly to alter the meaning of the fundamental documents of America, celebrates those documents and their long continuity. And that's a strength in the Republic. It even places the interest of extremely ambitious men in the continuity of the Republic. But the second thing is, if he can speak beautifully today, and I pray that he does, that will help a lot. And you know, he has done that. Many of his speeches, his prepared speeches during the campaign, were very good, I thought. And they weren't attended to much by his enemies. Maybe this one will be. And I hope it's really great.
I would agree with what Larry said about Donald Trump's speeches in the campaign. His speech on election night as well had a very elevated tone, recognizing that we have divisions and wounds that we need to bind up. I suspect it'll be in the same vein today, and I hope that he achieves that same level of eloquence that he had in many occasions in the campaign. As Larry said, many of Donald Trump's critics like to pretend those speeches didn't happen. They prefer to focus on the provocative tweet or the off-the-cuff remark, which really in the end matters very little compared to these major events. I mean, I know people in Washington, in New York obsessively follow the news every day, but most folks that I serve in Arkansas are not doing that. They don't have time to watch Twitter 24 hours a day. They're not watching the cable news every night. But there are occasions when they stop and pause to listen to what their president says, and the inaugural address may be the foremost occasion. And that's a moment for Donald Trump to break through all the clutter and to speak as a leader directly to the citizens of this country without a filter of the media, without his critics, sitting there carping about it. And I think he recognizes that based on some of the speeches he made at the critical moments in the campaign, like the convention speech, like the victory speech, which are some other moments where you can break through the clutter.
Now, Senator Cotton, you are not old enough, nor am I think Larry Arnn is old enough, to recall that when Richard Nixon assumed the office in 68, we're actually the same age, but in 68, the country was deeply divided. There had been riots and assassinations worse than we have now, preceding the inauguration of Nixon in 69. And yet, I don't think Nixon got as tough a time during his transition as Trump has received. It's been relentless, and everything has been amplified. Everything has been the worst ever. It is unrelenting. The media woke up from an 8-year hibernation with a toothache, and they're going all Sam Donaldson on him every day. Or am I simply ignoring what they did to Obama? Obama partisans will say they treated him poorly. I don't think so.
No. Well, first of all, I think, Lincoln, I don't want to be alarmist, but the only time that I know of so divisive a transition is in 1860-61. And, they were threatening to kill him, right? And They were leaving the Union. But this is nuclear weapons in political terms right off the bat. I mean, some of the things Trump has been accused of on so far bad information, they will end his presidency if they turn out to be true. And so that's before he takes office. It's amazing to me. I have not seen anything like this.
And a new congressman elected from Maryland will bring an article of impeachment. Now, it will not proceed, obviously. It's the new congressman in the southern part of Maryland saying that he is violating the emoluments clause on his first day, and therefore he's and this is an argument that Lawrence Tribe. Did you take Tribe at Harvard, Tom Cotton?
Fortunately not.
You didn't. Okay. Elizabeth Warren will probably give it some credit. Are you surprised that they won't even back off for a month?
Surprised, no. Disappointed, yes. Although in the same way that it's nice to see the Democrats, after 8 years, discover their inner Cold Warrior, it's also nice to see the Democrats discover their inner constitutional originalist, caring about the original meaning of things like the emoluments clause. I wish Donald Trump's critics would just give him a chance. For 10 weeks since the election, for 18 months, Donald Trump has been campaigning, and campaigning is mostly about words, whether it's speeches, interviews, tweets, what have you. But now he's going to be the president, and his actions and the results that his actions yield will be the way we can judge him. In the Army, we had a saying, when the ramp drops, the BS stops. So if you're on an airplane, you've got a parachute strapped on, or you're in a Bradley and you're about to charge out the back of the ramp, you can talk the big game all you want about how well trained you are, what a stud you and your men are, how you're going to ace the training range, or how you're going to crush the enemy. It's all talk. once the ramp drops, though, you've got to perform.
There's speculation that today he will add the Muslim Brotherhood to the list or he will direct the State Department to add, since they maintain the list, the Muslim Brotherhood to the list of organizations known to be terrorist, and that attaches to it certain disabilities. What would you make of such a move if that comes to pass, Tom Cotton?
Well, I don't want to speculate on the executive orders he may issue today. I will say that the Muslim Brotherhood has been a source for much ill all around the world, and it's kind of the fountainhead of movements like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. And for too long, too many Americans in Washington have not taken it seriously enough, and it's time to take it seriously. Some members of it are not Islamists; they don't wish us ill, but there are many who do.
And Larry Arndt, do you expect him to move quickly on many fronts, or to take a week to get his bearings straight?
I think he's a pretty aggressive guy.
So by nightfall, we may see things happening.
I think 2 p.m. 2
p.m.
I wouldn't be surprised. The thing about him, Tom spoke, I think, very wisely about him. These great speeches that are deliberate, his best speeches that are deliberate, they are one kind of thing. But if Donald Trump is attacked, or if Donald Trump means to do something, he gets right back after it. It's that's the pattern, and I think he's going to do a lot. And today,
when we come back, we're going to turn to Franklin Roosevelt's 1941 address, Ronald Reagan's 1981 address, and conclude by comparing President Obama and President Clinton, all in short order. And then Larry and I will take your calls and talk longer, as Senator Cotton has got to get off on. Are you part of the official welcoming or sending or anything like that, Senator Cotton?
No, Roy Blunt chairs that committee, and the rest of the members are the senior leaders of both parties in both chambers.
So you'll enjoy the day. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back with Senator Cotton. Dr. Larry Arndt, president of Hillsdale College, from the Kirby Center. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. 51 minutes after the hour, America. Hugh Hewitt from Hillsdale College's Kirby Center in Washington, D.C. on the day that Donald Trump is inaugurated President of the United States, the 45th President. I am joined by Dr. Larry Arndt, President of Hillsdale College, and all things Hillsdale available at hillsdale.edu, and Senator Tom Cotton, who, long ago and far away, attended a Hillsdale College as a young man seminar. Tom Cotton, today you will be looking out from behind the president towards the west. An innovation in 1981. And while I will go back in the next hour and look at the 1941 address, Ronald Wilson Reagan made that. The urban myth is he wanted to look at California. There are lots of reasons, but one of the things he said is he paid a note that across the river on Arlington were the row upon row of simple white markers bearing crosses or Star of David's. Quote, each one of those markers is a monument to the kind of hero I spoke of earlier. Their lives ended in places called Bella Wood, the Argonne, Omaha Beach, Salerno, and halfway around the world on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Pork Chop Hill, the Chosin Reservoir, and in 100 rice paddies and jungles in a place called Vietnam. And he went on to quote Martin Treptow, who gave a pledge, a World War I veteran. I think the veterans of America are with Mr. Trump. What do you think?
I believe so as well, based on my experience, my personal experience in Arkansas. And, now I would add to that list from Ronald Reagan's inaugural scores of soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan as well. And when Arkansans come to Washington and see me, especially if they bring their kids, teenage kids, I tell them that, you hear people on TV criticize Washington a lot. And I'll plead guilty to that sometimes. But what we mean by that is a shorthand about the kind of things that some people in Washington do that hurt people like us in Arkansas. But the city itself, especially the federal core, is a very special place, I think. And I tell them that from where you stand here in the Capitol, you can move west about 4 miles down our mall and ultimately ending up at Arlington National Cemetery, which used to be Robert E. Lee's farm, and learn the entire story of America and what makes America such a special and unique place in the history of the world. And I think it's very appropriate that we have our inaugural address now on the west front of the Capitol, looking down that mall, past the Washington Monument, towards the Lincoln Memorial, across the Memorial Bridge, which symbolically reunited the Union, into Arlington National Cemetery, which is our final hallowed resting place, which also used to be Robert E. Lee's farm.
And it was the place that President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Pence prepared to yesterday to honor the unknown soldier. I know you're part of the old guard that used to protect that place, and I'm glad that he went. I know it's a tradition. I also wanted to point out to you, Dr. Arnn, that in Reagan's speech comes a very famous line. I want to make sure we are a nation that has a government, not the other way around. And he went on to say that in the present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. That may be the most famous one-liner that Reagan ever got off.
Yeah, and in some ways unjustly, because it is very good. And notice how it's qualified. In the current present situation, government is the problem, because it's become a force unto itself, in my little opinion, and I think Reagan's. But, so Senator Cotton just spoke very movingly about that tour you can take of American history. Reagan actually moved the ceremony to the West, comments on that in the speech, and then he takes us on this tour at the end of the speech. He talks about the Washington Memorial, and he talks about the Jefferson, and he talks about the Lincoln, and his statements about each of those men is very beautiful. And then that ties to Martin Treptow. Up above, he said, each of us needs to be a hero, like these heroes, like Washington and Lincoln and Jefferson. And then he cites one. And the point of Martin Treptow's diary, one of the first men killed in the Expeditionary Force in the First World War, the point of his diary is, I must fight this war as if the whole result depends upon me. Reagan's first inaugural, which to my mind is one of the best, certainly one of the best modern ones, is a poem to self-government. It's just lovely, and remember, the ceremony had always been held on the east side, and he moved it around for this purpose and said so.
Yeah, Dr. Joseph Warren is a founder that he quotes, and I thought it was unusual. Nobody knows who Dr. Joseph Warren is. You probably do. But he thought it important. Our country is in danger, but not to be despaired of. On you depended the fortunes of America. You are to decide the important questions upon which rest the happiness and the liberty of millions yet unborn. Act worthy of yourselves. And Reagan is actually challenging everyone to get their act together and start working on behalf of the entire country. Not a bad message if Trump uses it today.
Look at the difference with the Obama first inaugural. Reagan says, I'm not going to fix the economy. You are. You see, you're going to work. We're going to get out of the way. And we're going to make work possible by good, stable laws. But the economy depends on what everybody does. And the whole posture of the speech is extremely thoughtful, in my opinion.
Senator Cotton, I know you were called. I appreciate your coming by. Thank you so much. Enjoy your first inauguration as a senator.
As a senator, yes.
Yeah.
I was here in 2013 as a congressman, and 8 years ago I was sitting in Meadowlam, Afghanistan with my troops watching the inauguration on Armed Forces Network.
Quite a change. Good to have you in the country. I hope your troops are well. Thank you both. We'll be right back. Hour number 3 of the inaugural day edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show coming right up.